Good morning and welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about how do I stop yelling at my teenager. I try so hard not to freak out and to be calm and respectful, but then I lose my shit and I blow up on them and then I feel guilty and then I beat myself up and I go in my bedroom and I cry and then I come back and apologize, but it keeps happening. This cycle of blowing up and losing your crap keeps happening. I just want to say for right now, you're welcome here. You are welcome here. I see you. You are not broken. You are not evil. You are not wrong. You are not bad. Let's talk about it. Okay? Let's talk about the blowing up. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, one of only 70 people in Canada to hold both designations. I have been working specifically with parents of teens for the last 16 years to help them end the painful disconnection, baffling blow-ups, stressful silences, to create lasting relationships based on trust, mutual respect, and genuine connection. I know that's what you want with your teen. I know. And I hope today this conversation is going to take you one step closer to that because I believe in you and I know you can do this. Okay, so let's talk about this. I actually had a mom message me this the other day. And I thought, you know what? We need to talk about it because there's nothing wrong with you. And we're not going to do any shaming. We're not going to do any judging. We're just going to talk about it. So if you tell me this, do you have the experience of wanting to parent differently perhaps than you got? Not better, not worse, just different. You want to parent differently. You're trying to create a different experience than what you got, or you have a vision in mind of the kind of parent that you want to be. And so you're getting up every day and committing to, I want to be this kind of parent. This is the who I want to be. Maybe it's what you wish you had had. Maybe it's just what you've seen or read in books or the podcasts and all the things. This is who I want to be. So every day you get up and you're like, yes, I'm going to be this parent. I'm going to do this. And then the wheels fall off. Maybe it's by 10 a.m., maybe it's by 8 a.m. before you even get everybody out the house. Maybe it's by 8 p.m. and you're back in your room crying in your bed because you blew up again in a way that you feel guilty and horrible and awful about, but it keeps happening. I just desperately want you to know you're not alone. Okay, I'm just looking at my notes here. So let's go deeper into this a little bit. It's not that probably what you're saying, that's that. It's the way I think that you think you might need to go about this, okay? So you're trying to communicate to your teenager needs, emotions, requests, tasks, chores, like basic things. So you are likely feeling disrespected because you're trying to ask nicely. Like I asked you nicely 1,000 times. You're trying to ask nicely, but it's not, they're not hearing you. They ignore you. And so what you're finding is if you don't blow up and you don't lose your shit, nothing gets done, except that you don't like that version of you. And your children are learning a version of you that you swore you wouldn't do. You don't want this. And so then you go back the next day and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna ask nicer next time. I'm just gonna ask nicer. I'm just gonna ask them with different words and nicer. It's not, but it's still not working. Does that sound familiar? Type yes in the comments if that sounds familiar to you. that you're trying to create something that every day you recommit to and it's still not working. Now, here is why this might be happening for you, okay? Let's talk about conflict for a sec. Was conflict, healthy conflict, modeled for you when you were a child? Was healthy conflict modeled for you? Like, did your parents do the asking nicely, and then you would kind of ignore them, and then asking nicely, and then they would lose their shit. They'd like yell and they'd like blow up. And then you would jump into action out of fear. And so you learned this model of bottling things up or attempting to ask nicely until you blow because you are internally feeling so disrespected and unheard. You see, if that was modeled for you, I see you. Your brain is simply repeating the pattern that it knows. At an unconscious level, even though your conscious brain, which by the way is about 2% of your brain, your conscious brain, like 2%. Yeah, it's like the size of the earth relative to the size of the sun, okay? So if your conscious brain is saying, but I swore I wouldn't do this. I said I wasn't going to do it and I'm still doing it. Why? What is wrong with me? And then you beat yourself up day after day about what a crappy parent you are, and you isolate because you don't want anybody to know that you're that parent. You're that awful parent who's not respectfully parenting, and you're yelling and losing your shit on your kid. Yeah, no, no judging, no judging, okay? But the more you judge yourself, the harder you are on yourself, the more critical you are of yourself, the lower your confidence goes. And those internal messages that you are telling yourself, I don't know what they are, I'm guessing. You're a terrible parent. You said you would never do this. You're a monster. How could you do this? Your parents did this to you. You swore you'd never do it. You suck. All of those things. I'm just saying, those messages become your outer truth. That's how our brains work. Your internal dialogue becomes your outer truth. So the way you are speaking to yourself internally ends up informing not only what you believe about yourself, but ends up informing how you behave, which also can inform, because those inside messages become the truth, they might spill out your mouth and come out towards your teen as well. Now, I grew up in an environment like that. I grew up in an environment where there was this real passive aggressiveness. I want you to label it properly. It's passive aggressive. What you believe are clear requests based on results are not actually clear. Because if they were really clear and they were getting through to your teen, you wouldn't need to blow up, okay? That probably also wasn't modeled for you as a child. That does not make you a bad parent, nor does it question your intellectual capacity, okay? So if you, I saw that, I got the, now I also have ADHD, so I was more forgetful, which I think was really irritating for my parents sometimes. I'm sure it was, I don't know how it wouldn't have been. So I was forgetful and I would get asked a couple times, but get distracted. And because they didn't know I had ADHD and they didn't know how to support my brain in task management, then they would lose it physically or emotionally, verbally on me when I didn't do what I was asked. So here's what I learned, and this is what I want you to hear. What I learned was that conflict was scary. What I learned in my emotional brain was that conflict was painful, terrifying, and needed to be avoided at all cost. Does that sound familiar to you? Like if you really think about it, go back to, not in your adult brain, I'm not asking your adult brain, I'm asking your child brain, which is still in you, psychologically proven, we all have an inner child, okay? What did you learn about conflict when you were a child? Now, again, I want to go to now. So what's happening for you now with the explosiveness and the yelling, you might also now see being modeled in your teenager. That your teenager may also be explosive. They may also be like turn on a dime, kind of calm, and then angry, which is partly normal for a teenager, okay? That is part of their brain development. So please don't try and be responsible for their brain development, because that's biologically going to happen with or without you, okay? So don't be blaming yourself for that. But their brain development, if they are seeing that's how you do conflict, like you saw how that's how your parents do conflict, then this is passing it on. And that's what I don't want that for you, and I don't want that for your teen, okay? So conflict in the brain, okay? Conflict, there's a couple things I want you to understand about conflict. It's a triggered state in the brain, often, of fight or flight. So this is the Dr. Daniel Siegel hand model of the brain, okay? This is your emotional brain, your amygdala and your thalamus, okay? And they are in an adult brain, in an adult regulated brain, okay? Their prefrontal cortex, this intellectual brain, is nicely protecting that. Do you see that? This is actually like if your ears were here, it's literally right inside in the middle of your brain, okay? This is an adult regulated brain. Now, when you are asking nicely, which I promise you is not actually the most constructive and proven ways to ask your teenager, because again, you weren't modeled and nobody teaches us this, so I don't know how we would know. You're asking and they're not doing it, okay? You're getting frustrated, you're getting triggered. I'm pointing back here because there's a part of your brain that is getting triggered that is partly your emotional brain, but it's partly back here in the back of your brain as well, okay? So you're getting triggered, and your prefrontal cortex, that intellectual impulse control, emotional regulation, higher level thinking, strategic, creative answers, it's all here in the front. It's about as big as a playing card, but a business card, but it's only about like 12 of them thick. That's trying to run the whole thing. You see the problem? Okay. So your brain is like going, like you're like asking again nicely, and you're asking again nicely, and then you're like, you see what's happening? Now the amygdala, the emotional brain, is left unprotected, and as soon as it is unprotected, your prefrontal cortex is going offline. You know, like your computer that's spinning, like, okay, it's going offline because this is getting hijacked. You're emotional, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling disrespected, you're feeling unheard. And it's true and real. So what's happening is your intellectual brain's going offline, your emotional brain is now beginning to take over until, as Dr. Daniel Siegel says, you flip your lid. You flip your lid. Now your prefrontal cortex, your intellectual advanced adult brain, is offline. It is not available. And that yelling outburst comes purely from your emotional brain of feeling triggered, because your limit, your boundary of feeling disrespected and unheard has been crossed, and your emotional brain is now saying, rah! And that's the yelling that comes out your mouth, okay? Same thing happens for your teenager, except that your teenager's brain doesn't look like this, because your teenager doesn't have an adult brain. Your teenager's brain is like this on a good day. They don't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. Their amygdala is almost always left unprotected as a part of their adolescent brain development. So they are very defensive, angry, often in a mild state of fight or flight, and they do not have emotional regulation or impulse control. So they will yell back. Okay. So I wanted you to understand that because I want you to know, again, you are not broken. You are not broken. You are not bad. You are not unfixable, okay? When I grew up and I noticed that I was doing this exact same thing with my kids, the exact same thing, the very thing that I said I wasn't going to do, and the very thing that I hated about when I was a child that ended up leaving me with quite debilitating anxiety that I've been dealing with for the rest of my life. And I'm not saying you're doing this to your kids. I grew up in a home where it was a little more extreme than probably what you're imagining, okay? And so I was always on edge because I didn't know when my mom or my parents were going to blow up, because it was like calm and then it was blow up. And so I learned to be hyper vigilant and always notice their emotions and their behavior to try and predict the next blow up in order to get safe, in order to be safe. That's what I learned from that as a child. And I noticed as a parent, I was doing this same thing because I wanted to be a nice parent. I wanted to be a respectful parent. And so I was trying to ask nicely, and then my kids would ignore me or not pay attention because I had not learned, this is the key about conflict, okay, that has you keep yelling. I had not learned effective regulation skills, let alone the effective and proven communication skills, let alone what it actually meant to speak and communicate a boundary and then act that boundary out in a respectful way to me and to my children. So I didn't know those three things, okay? I can't make it three. You know what I mean? I didn't have emotional regulation. I lacked effective communication skills because nobody's teaching this, okay? And I did not actually understand how to set and hold a boundary. So those three things, the trifecta of the storm, is what had me continue to like bottle it up, be passive aggressive, okay? Kind of like, well, could you do it now? Because I'm asking nicely, which are not clear, not effective requests by any means, but it felt nice to me. And then I was never truly asking for what I wanted in a way that worked, so I wasn't seeing results, so I wasn't feeling heard, so I was feeling more disrespected, and then I would blow and yell again. Does this sound familiar to you? This level of emotional dysregulation. So here's some of the things that I had to learn because I was so afraid of conflict. So I was never really saying what I needed to say because I also didn't have those three skills. I was never saying what I needed to say because I was so afraid of conflict. I had promised myself, because to me, when I grew up, conflict was scary. It was physically and emotionally painful. And honestly, it was terrifying at a lot of levels. It was terrifying. So I, wait for it, had promised myself I was just not going to be angry. Easy peasy, right? Yeah. Not possible. You are a human being. You have the full emotional experience. And anger is one of them. So is annoyance, frustration, resentment. Those are all real. All of them. Okay? So here I am, parenting two young children, committing to not be angry because if you've heard any of my previous videos, you see, I was just going to be Mary Poppins. That's what I had decided. Workable plan, right? Yes. I was going to be Mary Poppins, so I wasn't going to need to be angry because I was just going to ask my kids, make basic, clear requests, and they were just going to be compliant, and so we didn't need anger. I know, pipe dream fantasy, but that's literally what I thought. Literally what I thought. When I was angry, because I was holding it in, trying to hold it in for a long time, my whole body would shake. No joke. I can feel it right now when I'm talking to you. I do not do anger like that anymore, but this was my fear of conflict. I was so afraid of conflict that I was trying to hold it in. My entire body would shake. My nervous system would be so hijacked, I could feel it in my stomach, in my gut, in my pelvic region. I would just quiver and shake. My voice would shake. And that was me trying to hold the lid on. That was me trying to hold the lid on my conscious brain and not let my emotional brain escape. I'm just going to tell you right now, it didn't work. It did not work. I needed to learn to understand that conflict could be safe. That what happened when I was a child was not happening right now with my children. That I was not going to be physically or emotionally hurt, that I was safe, so that I could be angry, I could be upset, I could feel unheard, I could be disrespected, and I didn't need to yell and scream. Now, I needed to, first of all, teach myself, and it came from constant repetition, okay? I am safe. That I was safe. What happened, sorry, I've got a hair on my arm and it's driving me crazy. There. What was happening back then was not happening now, okay? So that took, healing and therapy and journaling, and I had to constantly say, I am safe. I am safe. And breathe. Do you know that breath is one of the fastest, simplest, freest ways to bring your nervous system down? And when your nervous system calms, so does your brain. Your brain comes back online. Even if it's just a little bit, even if it goes from this to this, your brain comes back online. So I had to learn to breathe. I had to learn to say that I'm safe. Okay? I needed to redefine conflict as being safe. And I know you're like, excuse me. Yeah, I needed to redefine what safe meant. That I could feel safe in a space of conflict and still say what I needed to say, and I was going to be okay. So that stopped me from yelling, from doing this like calm, and then like losing flipping my lid on my kids, was that I didn't need to do this ridiculous, completely unrealistic version of parenting that was like nice and like making it, and if I just ask you nicely, then you'll do it. No, it might have worked for you with your parents to just, when they asked nicely, but I'm willing to hard place a bet that you did it when they asked nicely because of the fear of what would happen if you didn't. That's why it worked. And I don't know about you, but I did not want to raise kids who were afraid of me. I wanted to raise kids who respected me because I modeled respect for them. So I needed to first feel safe in conflict, to know that I was safe. The second thing, which I know sounds really weird, I also needed to give myself permission to actually say what I really meant. Because you see, all this time where I was like hi, I'm calm, I'm a calm mom, I don't really need to say what I'm actually thinking. You're getting this ridiculous fake version of me that's not actually saying what I mean, because I was not giving myself permission to express my emotions effectively. So that builds more anger, that builds more conflict, so then I'm gonna blow, okay? I did not know how, and was not giving myself permission to effectively express my feelings all the way along the way. So instead I held them down, pushed them down to until they blew up. So I needed to learn how to give myself permission to effectively express my emotions all the time, every day, all along the way. That reduced it changed my perspective of conflict. And conflict was less necessary when I knew how to do that. I also, so that was number 2. So number 1 was I feel safe in conflict. Number 2, know how to effectively express my emotions on a regular daily basis so I didn't bottle them up. Number 3 was I needed to learn how to actually make requests. Like, stop this whole bullshit about just like, I'm nice, I'm gonna ask you nicely because I want you to love me. I'm a nice mom. Stop it. No, stop it. That expectation, that completely unbelievable, untrue expectation will keep you yelling. You will maintain the whole yelling parent thing, which I know is not authentic to you. I know that. So long as you have this expectation of being a nice parent. So just stop it. Stop it. Because if you are more invested in your teenager liking you and being nice and holding that, I don't know, it's not even who you are. First of all, they're never going to get to know you, which is really sad. Second of all, you will continue this whole bottle and then explosive blowing up. So don't do it. Okay? I needed to learn how to effectively ask for what I wanted using, effective emotional expression. I had to learn that. I had to learn how to make proper requests based on science of the brain and how my kids were hearing me and listening. I needed to understand that their brains are just a giant hot mess in there, and that this was not, if I say jump, they say how high. That's not how it worked. Because remember, I was choosing to be a parent that they weren't afraid of. So they weren't going to get it right the first time, maybe even the 10th time. And how to work with their brain development so I could be encouraging and not yelling. I could be encouraging without expecting compliance, which we've already covered before. That's not respect. Or expecting perfection. Because I was encouraging their brain to listen. I was encouraging their brain to understand new tasks, habits, when their brain does not have prioritization, time management, emotional regulation, impulse control, strategic thinking, critical analysis. Their brain doesn't have that. They don't have it. Current science shows the development of that software is not complete until they're 28. We used to think 25. It's now 28. So I had to learn patience and while expressing myself effectively and making proper requests. Okay, that's the third thing. The fourth thing, the magical fourth thing I had to learn to stop yelling was what a boundary actually was. Like what it actually was. Because a boundary is not about control. A boundary is not an expectation. A boundary is not because of making you feel safe and comfortable. That's not a boundary. A boundary comes from respecting yourself first and your kids, which we were never taught. So it's okay if you don't know this because it's not taught in school for some stupid ass reason. I'm full of spice this morning. I'm sorry. I had to learn what a boundary actually was, the language of setting a boundary, and the behavior of acting out and holding that boundary. So that's step number 4 is the boundary, but there's 3 parts to it. The language of communicating it, or what it actually is, because if you don't know that, it won't work. You can't get the language of communicating it. And then part 3 of the boundary is the behavior of actually holding it and carrying that out. When I learned those 4 things, that was when I stopped yelling, because I was not afraid of hard conversations with effective emotional expression on a daily basis. So I didn't need to do this pretending thing and keep shoving it down and shoving it down. And the best part was I was teaching my kids that they could do the same. And this is the part I wanted to get, I want to wrap up with. I modeled for my kids, once I changed, what they were about, 4 and 6, when I started to really get a handle on my yelling, my bottling and my yelling, and start to really shift this. I modeled for my kids the same things. They were safe. Conflict was a space of change, which is actually scientifically proven. You can't have change without conflict. Okay? that conflict is about change, that they were safe to effectively express their emotions in hard conversations in conflict, and they would be safe, okay? That we didn't need to disagree, we didn't need to agree, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't still the parent, okay? But they were safe to express themselves emotionally, that they had the language to make specific requests of me, of each other, of siblings. They had autonomy and advocacy, agency to make requests, and they knew how to make a request. They also knew how to express and set a boundary. So they were raised that we could have, and we did, sweet Jesus, we had hard conversations in this household. Yes, we did. But we had hard conversations without the need to yell, because we all had a safety and we had emotional expression. We knew how to make requests. We knew we weren't always going to agree. Okay. So those were the 4 things that I had to learn. Now, here's how I know my kids do this now. I was talking to my son the other day, and we were talking about money. And my oldest son has autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, and I have ADHD, so we trigger each other sometimes. And I said to him something about money, about what he was doing with his money. And he said he couldn't afford something. And I'm like, well, you can afford it. It's like where are you prioritizing your money? And I noticed he went kind of quiet for a minute. And I just let him be quiet. And then he said, I was feeling really angry because what I thought you just said to me is I'm not good with money. Now, he is a perfectionist, his autism spectrum, he keeps track of everything to the letter. And I said, oh my gosh, that would have been hurtful. So I've learned to empathize too. And he said, yeah, I thought what you were saying to me is I'm not good with managing my money. And I was really angry because I'm like, yeah, I do. I can show you. It's right here. And I was just processing for a minute because I was thinking about what you actually said, which was, how am I prioritizing what I spend my money on? And that, yeah, I never thought about it that way. I actually can afford this thing I said I couldn't do or couldn't afford, because I've been putting all my focus on saving for this thing, giving myself literally no room to this. And I was like, okay, well, that's a great realization. Like, congratulations. That, is there another way I can say this to you? So we were in this conversation about where he was angry about something I said. I clarified, he understood what I said, and we came to an agreement. Now, I know that's a simple one, but I'm going to tell you again for free. This was not a conflict-free house. I don't want you to have a conflict-free house. How do you have a relationship with someone if you're not bumping into them? Because that bumping into each other that feels hard and conflictual is actually how you unearth each other, understanding who you are, who your child is becoming in their developing brain. What do you stand for? Your beliefs, your values. Even when you disagree, how do you work? If we can't be in conflict, it's going to be really hard to create the trust, mutual respect, and genuine connection that you actually want with your teen. And I know you're capable of it. I 100% believe you. If this sounds like something that you want to change this whole stasis and then blowing up and then stasis and then blowing up, I developed through my own experience as a teenager and then raising 2 children and taking my coach training and certifications and raising 2 children because I tested everything on them, a proven 3-step system. And it's available to you. I'm going to put a link below. You can get on the wait list for my program. It opens again in a couple weeks. This is possible. I don't want you to go to bed every night beating yourself up. I don't want you to feel like a piece of crap because you've yelled at your kids, which, by the way, we're all going to yell at our kids. Can we not aim for perfection? Okay. And still get the tools to actually be the parent you do want to be. Not the perfect version, because we don't do that either. It is possible. So tap my name. There's a link in my profile, and I've got some free resources. This course is coming up. I want this for you. I believe in you. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will see you again here on Thursday on Instagram. And if you're on YouTube, I'd love a subscribe. Take care, everybody. Bye.